Yeah, so as I said before, I've been working on the regional mainstreaming strategy for the last couple of months with the input of the wider stakeholder team. Today's session is really about contributing towards that process. So right in the middle of the development of the regional component of the strategy, and I can talk to you a little bit about the whole process in the next slide. Yeah, so as you can see from the headline at the top there, today's session is really part of developing and finalising the regional strategy in January of next year. And so the regional strategy will provide some settings and context for the development of the national mainstreaming strategies in 4 or 5 countries from the middle of next year. Yeah, so I come from an organisation called Flinch Marketing, and we specialise in behaviour change programs. We've been working in the behaviour change space for about 20 years. And a big part of that work is around mobilising resources and looking at upstream change to enable people to do the things that we want to do at the community level. But a big part of this whole process is really listening to our audience, be that the communities, leaders, or even the funders. So we have insights that can inform our strategy. And a big part of what we're hoping to do with the regional strategy is to really engage those target audiences in the development of the communications activities and products. So this is just one example of a campaign we've been working on over the last couple of years to save the national bird of Samoa, the manumea. And a big part of that process has been directly engaging national leaders and community leaders and the funding community to understand what needs to be done to address some of the key issues around hunting of pigeon in Samoa. During the scoping process, I was lucky enough to be able to talk to a whole range of people who are deeply passionate and involved with the invasive management process. And essentially what we're trying to do with the mainstreaming work is take that passion that's been localized in some particular areas. So by the way, congratulations to Wallace and Fortuna for that amazing work that you're doing. But how do we take that work and scale it up? How do we integrate it into the work that's being done to address climate resilience or improve livelihoods in a more effective way? How do we help people to understand the benefits that they can derive from getting behind invasive species management? And I think during the scoping work, Monica Gruber really summed it up nicely by saying mainstreaming means getting people on board so that they support the management of invasive species for their own benefit, which I thought was a really great way of looking at what mainstreaming means in practice. Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to sort of kick the process off really with the production of that little video at the start of the session and looking at that amazing story about which I was not familiar with at all. I guess it's relatively new evidence around the connection between rat eradication, seabird protection, and the resilience of coral reefs. But what an amazing story to start with in terms of engaging that wider community in the conversation of the importance of protecting those incredibly valuable resources. But it's not just about rats. We're also looking at ways to reframe the conversation around invasive plants, invasive ants, in a way that people can connect more directly with the impacts that it's having on their food systems and their wider economic livelihoods. So obviously for us, we have to set some objectives for the mainstreaming work. And at a top level, it's really about making sure that invasive species management is seen as a priority for climate adaptation across the region. So in many ways, that's about understanding, as Philomena Nelson was saying in the video, how can invasive species management be integrated into climate adaptation planning work at the national level? In order to do that, we need to increase the understanding of how invasive species management is helping to increase climate resilience and support livelihoods. So that's our job, really, is to create some compelling stories together with communities and leaders so we can help to increase demand more widely so people get behind the invasive species project at a regional, national and community level. And ultimately, that's about increasing funding for action on the ground.
All right, thanks, Steve. And hi again, everyone. In order for us to contribute to the key objectives that Steve has just alluded to and contribute to the process of developing the mainstream strategy, we're going to present to you a couple of questions, which we will do through Mentimeter. Next slide, please. So if you have your phone on, please open your browser. And in your browser, please type the URL that's on the screen, www.menti.com. All right, if you guys are not already on what's on the screen, please click go to slide. Otherwise, if you're already there, please provide us with what are some of the main reasons that Pacific communities want to support the management of invasive species in their communities. So we've got a wide range of answers, but we please ask that you provide us your top 3. Right, our leading one, Steve, looks like the protection of native species.
Interesting. Yeah, we're really keen to get your feedback on this one to see, when we go out to the communities and ask the question directly, whether it resonates with those communities also. So this feedback's extremely helpful. So we're on a neck-to-neck thing here. Improving livelihoods is coming up. It's like a horse race.
Yeah.
We've got more people participating. So public health is lagging.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see kind of where this comes from, whether you're providing this feedback as an individual in a Pacific community or, a service provider or a conservationist. That would be really interesting to find out in the later discussion, Steve, which you will be ending up with the open-ended questions. So please, if you have more feedback or you want to contribute more, please be reminded there will be that opportunity at the end of this session. So we've now reached 37. That's a good number. We'll go on to our next question, which we want to find out what are the reasons that are stopping or that become barriers to Pacific communities supporting invasive species management activities. So we've got the issue of invasive species not being seen as a priority. And then we've also got the inability to, or just not understanding how we can support. So, we want to support, but we don't know how. So that's quite a wide range. And then in the middle, we've got people don't understand how it can support climate resilience, or that there's too much of a focus on Western biodiversity values. So, and then we've got concerns about the methods used. So that might be a little too gnarly for some people, but it's at the end of the day, it's work that has to be done.
It's really interesting to see here that the second highest one is just the inability for people to know exactly how to get involved or support invasive species management. So it could be as simple as practical guidance. So this is a useful feedback here. But obviously this idea of it not being seen as a priority next to some other issues that people might be facing on a daily basis, begs the question of how we can connect it to those things that people find more important.
Yeah. Fantastic work. If everyone submitted all their questions, we will move on to our next slide, which really we want to find out from you what you think are the best success measures for improving the management of invasive species in the region by 2030. So is it that we need more funding to be allocated to this work? Is it that the communities need to demand more of this work to happen? Or is there a need for greater understanding on how we can improve our livelihoods and our resilience to climate change? Or maybe we have all of that, but we need our leaders to call for a greater investment from the donor communities and areas like that.
So again, really interesting to see the emphasis on that greater understanding with the links on climate resilience. We were sort of discussing before that most people would have been thinking that just increased funding would have been the best indicator, but seeing that clear link with climate resilience is a really interesting finding here.
So we've got in the lead greater understanding of how it improves livelihoods and climate resilience, which is, Steve, how is that related to the mainstreaming activity, or how can we use that to achieve this goal that everyone's chosen?
Yeah, good question, Bella. I think what we were trying to do with the video really at the start of the session was to ask people what was important to them. And I think some of the feedback from J.R. Rumal and Ulithi Atoll was on the money in terms of understanding how can it improve the management of those resources that are so important to the local community. So I think John's asked if he can share that video now with his wider community because he was unaware of those connections between rat eradication and the health of the reef. So it's just great to see that the opportunity to start those stories being shared, amongst the communities, and then getting more communities to share their stories. So I think that sort of gets to the nub of what we need to do here with the mainstreaming strategy.
Awesome. Well, Steve, this is the end of the Mentimeter session for this section only. Like we said before, there is an open-ended question which will get everyone's feedback at the end when Steve's wrapped up. So please do keep your phone handy still. Thank you.
Yeah, so far we've identified a couple of key barriers through the scoping work. The first of all, the issue that we face is that, and I guess this comes through in the response to the first question about the incentive, is that everyone working in this space is deeply, deeply passionate about it in the area that they're working in. And the area that you're working in is massive. So you're dealing with a whole range of invasive species issues. But it's clear from chatting to people that in previous efforts, we've been a little bit too focused on biodiversity. So even the response that was provided here about the need to protect native species might not necessarily be held by the wider community as a key driver for getting involved in invasive species work. Although we're deeply passionate about these things and understand the connections, that may not be the case for communities, for leaders, or even funders may not be aware of these issues and the connections. So if we can improve the links between invasive species management and climate resilience and livelihoods, that's the core of our objective, as we've looked at before. It's a big barrier at the moment because people aren't making those connections. Now, can we find those community champions or national champions and expand on the small number that we've got at the moment to a much greater number of champions across the region? We need more community-based success stories with people like J.R. Rumal in that first video, front and center, talking about why invasive species management is important to their communities. One other thing that came through in the scoping work is that at the moment we really lack a clear, shared and motivating or inspirational goal that everyone can get behind between now and 2030, which is going to lead us at the end of the session to our kind of final question. Next slide, please. Yeah, so essentially the regional strategy is focused on these actions at the moment. So this may change depending on your feedback, but how can we involve leaders and communities and funders directly in the development of the communications activities and products? As you saw with the first video today, getting people directly involved and having that conversation, developing these compelling stories to show how invasive species management is really enhancing. How is it really supporting climate resilience and adaptation? How is it really supporting community livelihoods so people can get behind it? This work has been developed in close collaboration with obviously the climate change team within SPREP, partners like Island Conservation, who have great reach and muscle in terms of reaching out to a wider group of stakeholders, and the Global Island Partnership. You saw Kate Brown featuring in the video before. She's part of our advisory group. So a big part of what we're going to do with the regional plan is start to develop this bold vision so we can enhance climate resilience and livelihoods across the region by improving the way we manage invasive species. Next, please. So at the moment, we've got a range of different products and activities underway. We've started some media work. BBC World will be running a story later this year. We're developing a webinar series in collaboration with GLISPA and ABC Australia. As you've seen, we've already started to develop a range of video products. We're working on a podcast series looking at a range of stories that connect climate resilience and invasive species management and livelihoods with the ABC. We're developing a prospectus-style brochure so funders can understand the benefits of investing in this space. We're really developing a science media training program and engaging with media partners and media colleagues around the region so they can get behind the program as well. And obviously making the most of upcoming opportunities like the Our Ocean Conference, so we can make sure that the issue of invasive species and the protection of our valuable oceanic and nearshore resources is seen as a key issue that can be addressed. It's a low-hanging fruit, as Nick Graham said in the video. So let's take these opportunities that are coming up in the next few months to really get that message front and center. So finally, today, so thanks for your patience and thanks for your feedback. This last question, and I'm sure Bella will be able to help me with this one as well. So this is a chance for you to provide us with some direct feedback on what you think success in invasive species management for the Pacific region really looks like by 2030. So it'd be good if you could take a bit of a moment to think about, you know, a bold vision. Is it about seeing the Pacific as leaders globally in the management of invasive species for small island developing countries around the world, or, you know, wider than that? I know we're very proud in New Zealand of the work that's been done around predator control. Why shouldn't the Pacific region be leading in this space with all the terrific work that's going on already? So have a think a bit now about the sorts of things that you think would be bold and inspiring as stretch goals for achieving the mainstreaming of goals around invasive species management for the Pacific. Is there anything else, Bella, that you'd like to add to this session?
I think you've covered that really well. Thank you very much. It's nice to see that we have responses already. Yeah, we've got the predator removal of islands in every Pacific island country and territory. That's definitely something we would associate with success. And, you know, we're really hopeful that that can be achieved by 2030, if not earlier.
Yeah,
We've also got enhanced ecosystem services.
Sorry, Bill, just as I like that someone's popped in there, many success stories from all around the region. So I guess seeing, you know, how other people are defining what success means for them, you know, national and community level. So it's terrific to see these comments coming through.
Yeah, we've got some common ones around national leaders taking the lead so that, you know, the rest of the communities follow. So that's something that's being shared from the audience.
I love the one there about globally threatened birds are recovering. So that's what we're seeing in New Zealand now, as some of these threatened species are bouncing back, and I'm based here in Wellington, and it's a hugely motivating thing for communities to see the impact of the work that's being done around predator control. So it's a great one.
Yeah, another different one, but very important, is the awareness of the public. So someone here said members of the public are a lot more aware about their roles in managing invasive species, because like in the previous question we had, people do want to manage invasive species, they just don't know how. And we can achieve this by educating the public on what they need to know and equip them with the tools.
Yeah, it's a great point. I certainly learned a lot today myself from Steve Cranwell and various other people. So thank you very much for all of that.
We've got increased food security, you know, a lot of real practical and close outcomes for us as Pacific communities. So it's really nice to see that people are making these linkages at the end of this session.
That's amazing.